The road stretched endlessly before Jason, the black ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the thick forest night. He was used to driving these long, lonely routes as a trucker. It gave him time to think. The hum of the engine and the rhythm of the tires rolling over the pavement were familiar. The lullaby soothed him into a state of near meditation. But tonight was different. The moon was a pale silver hanging low in the sky, casting eerie shadows on the trees that lined the highway. He hadn't passed another car for miles, and a strange tension filled the air. Jason. He glanced at the clock on his dashboard. Midnight. Of course he had heard the stories, the old ones. There are highway legends about hitchhikers who vanish into thin air and ghostly figures who roam the roads. But he wasn't the superstitious type. He flicked the radio on, searching for some noise to break the silence, but all he got was static. Sighing, he leaned back in his seat and let his thoughts drift. Suddenly, his headlights caught a figure standing by the side of the road. Jason's heart skipped a beat, and he slowed down instinctively. A woman, young and pale, stood. Her dress was fluttering in the breeze, just outside the glare of his lights. She was motioning for ride. Jason pulled to the side of the road, his truck hissing as it came to a stop. He rolled down the he leant out slightly to get a better look at her through the window. "Need a lift?" he called out. The woman nodded, her expression blank, almost vacant. She didn't speak, just walked around the truck and climbed into the passenger seat. As she settled in, Jason watched her in the mirror. There was something off about her, something he couldn't quite place. Her skin was too pale, her movements too stiff. But he shook it off. Maybe she was just cold or tired. "Where are you headed?" he asked as he pulled back onto the road. She hesitated for a moment, then finally spoke in a soft, distant voice. "Just a little further down the road." Jason nodded and focused on driving. The silence between them grew heavy, but he didn't press her to talk. He had picked up his fair share of hitchhikers, most of whom just wanted a quiet moment ride. But after a few minutes, he couldn't help but glance over at her again. She was staring. She stared straight ahead, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You okay?" he asked. She turned to look at him, her eyes wide and hollow. "I was left here a long time ago." Jason felt a chill run down his spine. Something about her words felt wrong. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the road, her expression unreadable. Jason gripped the steering wheel tighter, his heart beginning to race. There was tension in the cab. It was almost unbearable now, the air thick with an unease he couldn't shake. He wanted to pull over to tell her to get out, but something kept him driving. Suddenly, the woman began to speak again, her voice low and eerie. "It wasn't my fault. I didn't mean to die." Jason's blood ran cold. He turned to her, his eyes wide with shock. "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed to the horizon, where the faint light was visible. The outline of a bridge loomed in the distance. "That's where it happened," she whispered. "That's where I died." Jason slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding. The truck skidded to a halt, and he turned to her, his mind racing. "What are you saying?" But the woman was gone. The passenger seat was empty. Jason sat there in stunned silence, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. His heart was pounding where it felt like it might just burst out of his chest. He looked around wildly, but there was no sign of the woman anywhere. She had simply vanished. His mind reeled, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had he imagined it? Was he losing his mind? But then his eyes fell on the seat beside him, and his blood turned to ice. In the middle of the seat, there was a single pale handprint, pressed into the leather as if someone had been sitting there moments before. Jason's hands trembled as he started the truck again, his mind racing with fear and disbelief. He had heard the stories, but he had never believed them. Until now, he floored the gas pedal, desperate to get away from the bridge, and the ghostly figure that had been there haunted him. As he drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was still with him, watching from a distance the shadows. He knew, deep down, that he would never be able to forget the last midnight passenger.